Hello, welcome everyone. We are so thrilled to have you joining us for our panel today, an inside look at the Midwest best cultures. So thank you so much for taking time. We're going to be introducing ourselves all here shortly, but we'd love to go ahead and get to know who you are. So if you want to go ahead and post in the chat, let us know where you're joining us from. Let us know why you joined the conversation today, and let's see which city has the best representation. For myself, I'm Hannah. I'm your moderator and a member of the Purpose Jobs team. We are your hosts today. If you are unfamiliar, Purpose Jobs is your go-to startup and tech storyteller and community builder, especially for Midwest organizations. We love being able to elevate the middle of the country. A couple of housekeeping items as well before we get started. Chiefly, please use the chat. You can engage this way via any of our social media live streams on LinkedIn or YouTube. So if you are viewing on our website, go ahead and click one of those links to YouTube or Facebook or YouTube or LinkedIn rather, and join us there so that you can engage in the chat. We'd love to hear from you. Again, start by letting us know where you're joining from. And then a couple of other things that you can do throughout the conversation is as we're chatting, as we're highlighting things about best culture, let us know if we say something that really resonates with you. We'd also love for you to chime in with your own advice. You probably have ideas that we might not have, so we'd love your expert contribution as well. And then go ahead and post your questions, any questions that you have for panelists throughout the conversation, and I'll work to incorporate those when they're more relevant rather than saving them to the end. So wrapping all of that up, definitely engage with us in the chat. We really appreciate and value that. But yeah, without further ado, let's go ahead and kick off today's topic. So workplace culture, as I'm sure a lot of you know, is a really important thing. It's really defining. It can make or break a job offer. And it's one of the reasons that people stay or leave companies. It's just become that much more important over the last few years. But how do you create it? How do you find it? And how do you know that it's not too good to be true? So today, we're thrilled to be joined by three panelists who are going to be able to share their expert insights. They all are part of companies with really great cultures. And we're really excited to hear their insights, from giving us the inside scoop on their own company culture to ideating on key ways to build a culture that really keeps a team around. And then also helping us understand how culture is best communicated, or how when we're interviewing for a job that, we can ask the right questions and get the right engagement to really get to know that culture authentically before we make the decision to join that team. So a special thank you to all of our panelists for your time today. We're incredibly grateful. And again, thank you to all of you for joining in for today's conversation. So if you haven't already, let us know where you're joining from. But otherwise, let's kick it off and meet our panelists. So to our panelists, would love to hear just your name, brief background, what company you're with, and then why you're excited to be here for the conversation today. So Mendel, can I send it to you first?
Sure thing. Yes, excited to be here. Learned a lot about the importance of culture throughout the last couple years of my personal startup, Gearsupply. Our team has grown very fast, and we've done major strides in the culture department, not necessarily changing anything, but by focusing on culture, on the things that we had valued. And I'm excited to hear what all the other panelists have to say. A quick 10-seconder about Gearsupply. We are the leading marketplace for event production equipment. So production companies can sell their gear to other production companies through this platform. It's a big issue. There's a lot of sustainability concerns, and we're trying to solve that. And culture has enabled us to scale much faster.
Awesome. Thanks, Mendel. Dave, I'll go to you next.
Thanks, Hannah, and thank you, by the way, for that wonderful introduction. I'm David Anderson. I'm currently about to wrap up my second year as Data Operations Manager at AccumTech in Ann Arbor, Michigan. I've worn a lot of hats in the past. I was formerly a shelf stocker in the graveyard shift. I sold vacuums door to door. I was a professional brewer for a number of years. And eventually I was able to lead a digital advertising analytics team for one of the largest car brands in the world. From this wide-ranging experience and others, I've seen the gamut between mom and pop shops with less than 10 staff, as well as giant international corporations with over 10,000. So really excited to share some of the insights that I've learned and experienced along the way with the other panelists and everyone out there as well.
Awesome. Thanks, Dave. That is, love hearing the background there, and excited for the perspective that you'll bring. Awesome. Sarah, I'll let you close us out.
Yeah. Hi, everyone. Thanks so much for joining us today. I am Sara Bakken, and I'm the lead recruiter at Fund That Flip, which is really kind of home based out of Cleveland, Ohio. Though we have a lot of team members all over the country, which is, I think, part of what we're talking about today. In my recruiter role and in my previous roles as an educator, I've always really thought about the way that each person brings their unique potential to the conversation at the organization level, to the culture of the organization. And I'm excited to talk about that today, as well as from that recruitment or that job seeking part of the process, how that kind of plays out for folks, and what might be helpful to you as you are having those conversations with recruiters and hiring managers and trying to uncover the culture in the organization that you're looking to join.
Awesome. Thank you much. Thank you so much, Sara. Really excited to hear all the varying perspectives that we have here today on all things about culture. So to kick things off, we're going to kind of start within kind of a section of defining culture and hearing more about our panelist cultures as well. So the first question is really just, what is culture? What are some of those distinguishing characteristics? What sets one culture apart from another? Sara, can I send it back to you for this one?
Sure. Happy to start with this question. I think you probably couldn't start with a bigger question than what is culture. Coming into this conversation, the predominant thought that I kept having about this was that essentially culture has to have some kind of fluidity and flexibility to it. It's not a static kind of concept or single policy or thing that can be instituted once and for all and last for all time. It's much more of a living thing. And I think going back to what I just mentioned about building the team, and maybe this is a recruiter perspective, but each new person that joins an organization without exception changes that culture by even like minutia. And so having a core and having those core values, those beliefs of the organization, that's really where the culture kind of leads out from, I think is really at the definition of it. But again, it's not static because each person that comes in brings a new voice to that conversation and what that can be in the organization.
I love that answer, Sara. I think it's such a good point that each individual will make an impact on it and change it. Dave, can I go to you next?
Absolutely. And Sara gave such a great description. I really, really love that. I thought about this question a lot, and I was finding myself listing out like 10, 20, 30 different items that make up culture, and really trying to boil that down and condense it into something concise. And what came out of that was, culture is sort of like the personality of that workplace. It's sort of your internal brand, your identity in a lot of ways. And just like people, businesses can either have a great personality that's attractive and it's inviting, or it can have a pretty terrible one that is putting people off. And so that's kind of how I think about culture.
I love that because yes, the internal brand is very different from the external brand. And that's where we, often are coming in to help companies tell the story of their employment brand, which is that internal brand. So love that perspective as well, Dave. Mendel, I'll go to you, and I'll also encourage, the audience, let us know what defining characteristics you think make up a culture too. But Mendel, all you.
Thank you. I think on the last point, I actually once gave a speech about culture. And the line I said was, culture is what enforces your brand. And it really is that. If you mentioned about companies having different kind of personalities, it's not necessarily a bad thing for a company to have a cold personality. If you're an underwriter or, in the insurance adjusting or, all these different industries that are very, very highly skilled and very precision based, you probably want a culture that's a little bit more stiff and rigid. If you're in our industry, which is the entertainment industry, you need a culture that's a lot more service-based and a culture that's a lot more about the community and about the entertainment industry and the concert industry. I mean, there's only a couple thousand companies in my industry, so you're not going to get away with having a bunch of guys, with pens and papers and suits and ties. You're going to need to have that diverse background that reflects the industry that we're dealing with. So I guess that doesn't necessarily answer what culture is, but the importance of culture for sure is being able to feel that personality of that brand and say, this is the brand I want to work with because this reflects what we are as a company. And makes sense, just like you want to be friends with people that are similar to you and have similar personalities to you. It's the same thing with companies. People want to do business with companies that they feel they can relate to and that they see on their Instagram or their Facebook, oh, they're doing things that I would like to be doing, and they're giving back to the community in a way that I would like to give back. And their people do the same similar things that our people do in our company, and that builds that sort of friendship between businesses. So to me, culture, not necessarily what it is, but what it does is it builds that brand to where other businesses want to connect and feel comfortable being around your business and working with your business.
I love that because I think a lot of times we might think of culture very internally, how I enjoy my job, how I work with my teammates and stuff. But I think you're really highlighting an important point, Mendel, in that it's also like, how is the vibe between you and your customers, between you and your audience? So really knowing your audience, I think is a really valid point. And I think like that also points out that, one culture can be like there's no perfect culture. Like there's going to be variation between cultures and it doesn't make one better than another. A lot of it comes down to kind of the people and the team and those that you're working with and finding that vibe and those values that are really important to that group of people in that organization. So I think all really important things there to just create that cohesion between team, between customers and so on and so forth. So love all of that. Thank you all for sharing thoughts there. So second question here is, would love to just understand a little bit about why you joined your organization, or for you, Mendel, founded your organization. Why do you stick around? What do you love about the culture? Just kind of highlighting a little bit more about your individual organization's cultures. Dave, I'm going to start with you this time.
Great, thank you. I'll just be completely honest. Navigating the difficulties of COVID, I was going through a deep depression. I was going through an intense period of burnout with my current job, and I just needed a light at the end of the tunnel, a change of scenery to kind of get me out of that. And so I started looking for jobs, and I saw this job posting from AccumTech that really stood out to me because they touted that they had placed on Cranes Detroit's 100 coolest places to work for 3 years running. And I was super intrigued by that. By the way, it's 4 years running now, and we're anxiously awaiting the results for year 5. So doing an awesome job on that. I stayed because as soon as I joined, it just felt so right. I kept feeling like I needed to pinch myself or something, like, what's the catch here, guys? Who's pulling the trick on me? But the people and the relationships and the bonds are just really, really close and really strong. We care about each other's personal lives. We look out for each other. We celebrate each other's wins, and we work through our setbacks. So I've really, really enjoyed, all of those experiences at AccumTech.
And you have a Danny DeVito cutout, right?
That's correct. Yes, Danny makes regular appearances in our meetings and conference rooms and our tables.
That's awesome.
Dave, is he gonna show up today?
I might need help pulling him here, but we could pull him in.
Yeah, just ping Erin real quick. I'm sure she'd love him to spotlight. Awesome, Dave. Thank you. Mendel, I'll kick it over to you.
Yeah, I will admit I did not realize the importance of culture. I worked in a pretty corporate setting up until I got into this startup, and I'll show you the dangers of not having culture. To answer your question, when we first started, we always hired for the specific skill set and criteria around the role. And somebody told me about a great book called From Good to Great. And actually, it was somebody who told me about this book as I was burning out, similar to Dave's scenario, but this time in my own company. And I was like, yeah, I'm going to throw in the towel. This is too much. I'm not ready to run this sort of company. Everything is pulling teeth, and we're making money on the deals that we're doing, but basically everything short of the actual deals is just terrible. And somebody told me about this book, and I read the book, and all of a sudden it clicked. I said, oh, I'm hiring skills. I'm not hiring people. And I said, okay, let me think about who is actually on my team that is excited about what we're doing. And this is a little bit of a revelation. I don't know if I should say this on here, but my whole team knows this, and they're big champions of this. I was afraid to make certain cuts in the office around culture because I felt bad, making certain cuts. And I spoke to somebody who is a big champion of culture and has this very successful startup with a couple thousand people. And he said, Mendel, if you really care about the people that do care about what you're doing and the people that are your core, it's not fair to leave those other people there. And you're not doing anybody a favor by leaving those other people there. And we ended up making a decent cut, and we refilled all those positions with people that we felt identified with our mission. And one of the interesting things, actually, after we made the cuts, we looked back, we didn't even realize this. All the people that were on the cut had some sort of disciplinary write-up action. And I don't think it was a coincidence. I think that those two things come hand in hand. If people are excited about the culture and if people are excited about the mission, they're not going to get written up. It's just not going to happen. They're going to work hard. They're going to want to do the best things. And when they make mistakes, it's the exact type of mistakes that I want people to be making. I want people to make mistakes. I want people to go out there and try new things. And there's a very, very big difference between being written up because you just don't care, and between making a even catastrophic mistake sometimes because you were trying to push the envelope and figure out the next best way that you can, grow that mission and that brand that you're doing. And we, after making these layoffs, within 1 month, did better than our best quarter ever in that same period. So it was March. That March was our best sales month, and it was better than the entire Q1 we had ever done historically. And that was with a very short-handed team. Thank God we managed to replace all those roles with really, really, really passionate people. And really the last 2 years for me has totally shifted after reading this book and focusing on getting the right people on the bus and less about what the skill sets of those people are, and more about, are they fired up about the mission? If they are, they're going to figure out how to get it done. And, we, last thing I'm dragging on over here, but we had an office party before we went to a Reds game. And I don't know if anybody follows baseball over here, but the Reds are doing amazing. And Joey Votto was injured after coming back to this team of all rookies. And they said, are you still needed on this team? And he said, I hope so, but I don't know. And that's kind of the feeling that I get a lot of times. I look back and I say, wow, like these guys are doing things way better than I ever could have imagined. I myself would have done them, and for sure better than the people that I was looking to hire pre-building around culture. And now that we're culture oriented, I mean, it's just, every time I see what's being done, I'm blown away. And it's just because people are fired up and people are mission driven.
I love that. Thanks for sharing, Mendel, and for the vulnerability of those lessons that you learned in your journey. I think, being people driven, being, putting your people first, and that cultural element, I think, as you just explained, is a really strong example for why that's so important. Sara, I'll kick it over to you.
Yeah. A question that I actually get to answer a lot in phone screens with candidates, why are you here? And why are you still here? And what it does come down to is the people, which do make up the culture. You're going to hear that thread through my messaging today, probably being the person who gets that first interaction with people coming in the door. It's a part of the team that I feel really connected to. But not only that, it's the way that the group of people comes together to create, and Mendel talked about this a little bit, a safe space to bring new ideas, to push the status quo. We are a real estate fintech doing something really unique in real estate investment, doing something really unique in a niche industry. And to keep doing that and to keep having it be unique and really make an impact, we need people to feel safe to try something new, to keep kind of pushing it. And I know when the company that I was at previously, I just felt like new ideas really fell on deaf ears. It was really hard to even bring up a new idea and have it be encouraged, certainly not, and taken that next step very rarely. And so I've loved as a recruiter to be able to really kind of take the lump of clay that is like our recruiting process and how we bring people into the team and really try new things and mold it and put it in the kiln each time we bring somebody on and see how that kind of fits into our menagerie. So absolutely love that reason that I came aboard, and the way that each and every day it really kind of reiterates itself in a new light.
Mm-hmm. And, I think the new idea element is especially just so much fun in a startup environment where you are building culture from ground up. So really love that, and just opportunity to fail. Multiple people have highlighted, have hit on that, and it's just really important for growth and, feeling empowered and such to try new things. So burnout was mentioned twice. So I kind of want to insert this question a little bit. How can a strong culture help support or manage burnout, or as you all were going through burnout, what was really causing that, I guess? So I know Dave and Mendel, you both mentioned this. Dave, do you want to kind of talk a little bit about like how you feel like you could have been better supported through burnout, or how maybe AccumTech now like prevents you from feeling burnout? Because I've been there as well, that, through COVID, that caused me to leave my last job. So yeah, would just be curious. I'll turn it over to you, Dave.
Yeah, I mean, I think just having a really strong safety net and social support system in your business helps prevent that in so many ways. When people feel isolated, or they feel like they have the weight of the world on their shoulders and they can't ever catch up to their to-do list, they're constantly falling behind. You can really fall into this cycle of never quite being able to dig yourself out, and sometimes you just need a helping hand. So, having a strong culture, and you had mentioned earlier, I think Sara had mentioned earlier, having a culture where it's perfectly acceptable to speak up and share opinions and give feedback is so important in building that bond, that trust, where people don't feel like they have to do everything on their own.
Love that. Thank you, Dave. Mendel, any thoughts on your end on burnout?
Yeah, I mean, so obviously I'm in a slightly different position, because being the owner and founder of the company, it's easier for me to do kind of trivial bucket list tasks, because it's pass fail for me. There's not really a job security concern, but I do see, to Dave's point, when there's not a mission, even for myself. I mean, you guys both mentioned vulnerability. I was extremely uptight with the wrong players on the bus because I felt like I would not be able to express what I really wanted to do as a mission. And one of the things that was very relieving for me was by having the right players on the bus, all of a sudden I felt so much more comfortable speaking my concerns, and concerns about, is this going to work? Is this not going to work? Here's where we're holding financially. Here's where we need to get to, all those sorts of conversations that required a lot more vulnerability I couldn't have with the way that I had built the team. And once we had made that strong shift, and it was really, it was more than 180 degrees. I don't know how you get more than 180 because then you start going the other way, but it was such a humongous shift, and it changed everything. And I've been sleeping probably less than 5 hours on average a night since we've made that shift. And I don't feel tired. I don't, like, I'm so fired up and I'm so excited. And it's because of, like Sara mentioned, that support group. And like Dave mentioned, having that mission. I go to work every single day and I can talk to people and I don't feel like things are building up on my chest. And even if things are don't look good on a certain project, I can tell people on the team and not be afraid, oh, they're all going to quit because, we're struggling in X department or Y department. They know that I got their back, they have my back, and we can talk about these things openly. And it just made me even more goofy around the office. All the things that make it really feel like part of the reason why you trust your siblings and your spouse and your significant other is because you feel that no part of you is hidden from them, and that makes you be able to cover a lot of ground a lot faster. And it's definitely a reality by us now that I feel like I can really expose all of the vulnerabilities and the things that I'm nervous about, and that helps me stay grounded and not burn, I don't burn out as much because I feel like I get things off my chest much quicker, much faster, good, bad, whatever it is. It's an open line of communication. It's a lot healthier. And I think I can work much harder, much more focused, and not get burnt out because we're on the same page. I
love that. I think when someone does start to feel burnout, oftentimes step A is like asking for help, talking with your manager and being like, I am just like, I'm not here presently. Like I'm tired. Yes. Feeling that burnout. And then step 2 is for them to really be able to offer that support, and, having that mission and something that you really believe in, and are excited about to come work on, every day really makes a big difference there. So, thank you both for sharing thoughts, on that. I'm going to move us on to our next question now. So we've talked a lot about more of like the soft side of culture. I think benefits are also something that plays into culture, the support and or flexibility, or things like that can really make a big difference as well. So just giving you all the opportunity to kind of shout out your company's benefits a little bit more. Would love to hear what are some of your key benefits. How does that make an impact on your culture? So Sara, I'm going to kick things over to you first.
Yeah, something that's been kind of pinging around in my head as we've been talking already today, and it's arguably like somewhat controversial, I think, in light of what we're talking about, but we have to remember that there is like this little bit of a pit hole that you can fall into with culture and getting like a really like-minded groupthink scenario where you could have a single person who's kind of square peg and everyone else's round hole scenario, and feeling kind of on the outside of that. I think benefits and policies, so kind of encompassing both of those, can be a great equalizer. And when they are really emphasized and acted out, it's not just the what I say and in writing in my policy and my benefits, but how that translates to the day-to-day can make a really big difference in someone feeling a part of that, especially when sometimes culture can become like, we're all thinking the same thing. We're all pointed in the same direction, especially in a startup, right? Nose is pointed this way. We're all headed there. Making sure that there's space for differences, different priorities. And that's where benefits, I feel like you have a wide variety of things that are going to appeal to different people at different points in their lives, whether that's a couple of medical benefit options that are 100% employer paid. So that has a financial element to it, where the deductible might not meet the needs of another individual, but they can find another plan that meets their needs. Or having unrestricted, flexible PTO, the opportunity to not kind of grab for kind of like acorns like a squirrel with like minutes and hours to get a day off, but to really have that flexibility to take the time when you need it to be with your family. And I think all of that plays into what we were just talking about around burnout, having it in policy and having it in benefits, that this is yours to have. This is yours to have balance and take care of yourself and to be part of what we're doing. So those were just a few of, I think, really excellent benefits at Fund That Flip that I'm sure we see at a lot of startups, are pretty progressive in their benefit offerings, but that allows people to do what Mendel said, come as their whole self to work, feeling like they're taken care of, not just through their work and through their team, but through the things that we ultimately need living in the US to survive, right? To have those elements kind of supplementing what we have as a whole package. So kind of went off the rails there a little bit with that, almost like a diversity statement as well. But I think it's written into your policies and you act it out, and that's really essential.
Awesome. I love that, Sara. And I think we've got an audience question about kind of how do age or generational differences factor into your culture building. So I was going to get there as well. So, as we kind of continue to answer this question, would love to also, understand, like, oftentimes when we're trying to build a culture, we're trying to build people who, fit really well into the culture, but how do we still make sure that diversity is a part of that? So Dave, I'm going to kick that whole conglomerate of a question over to you next.
Yeah, I mean, diversity and inclusion is definitely an important part of the formula, right? But, we're all trying to kind of row in the same direction, and we want and we encourage, challenge to the status quo. And part of that means bringing in people that may have a different opinion or come from a different background. And that's good. That fosters that communication, that fosters debate and that open sharing that I talked about earlier. So that diversity and inclusion is such an essential ingredient to the formula that, it may be tempting for some people to try to just stay with what you know. But I would challenge people to be a little bit uncomfortable and go out of your way to make sure you're challenging yourself and you're putting yourself out there to hear different opinions and backgrounds.
Awesome. Thanks, Dave. Mendel, I'll kick it over to you to close us out there.
Yeah, I guess kind of dovetailing off of Dave and Sara, one of the things that I personally want to build our culture around is people that are passionate and have a strong backbone. And now I don't necessarily have to agree with what their principles are, but the fact that somebody's principled means that they are going to see things through whatever it is, whatever the project is. And that's something that we screen for very hard. If whatever somebody says their opinion is on something in an interview, we'll challenge that and we'll give them 5 other scenarios to try to back off of their opinion and to give us a kind of a people pleaser answer. And right away we hear that, we say, okay, well, that's a nice answer, but you're not the right person for us. You might not say it in those words, but I'm really looking for people. I know a story that I often mention was there somebody who applied for a job and mentioned that they had a certain criminal piece on their background for protesting at a certain protest. And I said, would I have gone there? Probably not. But do I like the fact that you stood up for something? I love that. Whether or not I agree with what you're standing up for, the fact that you have the backbone to stand up for something that you believe in, to me, is how an idea is going to get across. I mean, you read about the great companies like Apple and, all these companies where you hear about their fights that they had internally, and people were willing to die on those hills in order to get their idea across because they were really passionate about those ideas. And that's how these great ideas and great companies, everybody sharpens each other by having these very, very wide backgrounds and diverse backgrounds. And so forget about from the value set of, everybody, in my opinion, I'm a religious person, is God's creation, and you have to treat everybody respectfully. Besides for just the fact that it's the right thing to do, it makes you a better company. When you have people that have a backbone from a very different perspective than you do, it sharpens you, and it makes you have to stand by your ideas more, or you get convinced by their ideas because their ideas, and they fall for them. But anybody who's not ready to fight for the ideas probably is not going to be ready to fight for some sort of innovation and some sort of pushing the envelope type of creative process that Sara was mentioning was getting shut down in her previous role. And we definitely look for that. And if you come in, you would not expect the guy who looks like I do to have the team that looks like they do. And to me, I've learned so much from being around that sort of team. And we don't look for people that look interesting, but definitely that, that's an indicator. That shows me that somebody's ready to not blend in every single thing that they do, and is going to be ready to fight for an idea and fight for some sort of position that they have, and probably convince me, because I'm probably wrong more than anybody else. So it's definitely, to me, I don't know if that answered the benefits question, but it turned into a DEI question.
Yeah, I love it.
But yeah.
No, that's great. Thank you so much for highlighting, Mendel. I think that backbone makes a ton of sense. People who are just willing to, really make sure that their idea gets across and stand up for what they believe in, while, also, hearing what other people have to say. So for sure. Okay, we're going to move into kind of a next segment, which is more just going to be about creating culture and how we create that culture within our organization. So would love to hear from everyone on, what are some of the most powerful things that HR, other leaders, team, everyday team members, what can they all be doing to create a strong culture? And think about that generally, but also would love an element of, how do they also do that in a remote and hybrid culture, knowing that that's really common in today's day and age. So yeah, Dave, I'm going to send this one to you first this time.
Perfect, thank you. At the end of the day, you have to walk the walk, right? The leaders in your organization have to set the tone for everybody else, and you can't set the expectation and then not follow it yourself, or else people just aren't going to buy into it. So, one of the things that AccumTech has done that I like a lot is we found organic ways of bringing people together. One of those benefits from the last question that any company out there can start doing tomorrow, and I recommend that you do. We've encouraged community groups within our organization to pop up. So we have, interest groups for cooking and food and outdoor activities and gaming and a number of different things. And they are community driven. They have events going on every month, and it brings people, the reason that it's so powerful is that it brings people together that I don't normally work with. There's teams all across the company, and I never see somebody from team Y over there, but I'm talking to them on a regular basis because we share a common interest now. So it's stuff like that's so important, and having those sort of organic ways of doing things, because I think everybody has probably experienced mandatory fun meetings before. That's really the most powerful way to do it.
Awesome. I love that, Dave. I hope there's been some good food cooked and shared with the rest of the office as well there. Sara, I'll kick it over to you.
Yeah, definitely. When I was thinking about this question, the thing that really stood out in my mind that I wanted to touch on was this idea that I think within the broader organizational culture, and I've seen this in my organization, but each team does have a team culture as well. And usually it's like, it's founded with the same like heart, the same core values as the organizational culture, but each leader brings their own unique style of leadership, of listening, of sharing information. That communication is really the thread, I think, that walks the walk, to use Dave's language, in the actual day-to-day of the work, which is ultimately like why we're all there. And so having that culture woven in those day-to-day conversations and how people lead. And so zooming back from that, I think that what really defines that and how you create a great culture has to start with a lot of self-awareness from the leaders on what's their natural way about going about things, and couple that with understanding really well where your team and those around you are coming from, how maybe they what their thinking preferences are, where they kind of tend to kind of go first, so that you can understand where there might be friction points in your communication and where your natural tendencies may be causing division or challenges for folks. So I think it really starts with self-awareness. I don't think there's a one size fits all, this is how you make a great culture for your organization or your team, but having a really good understanding of yourself, and then being really transparent with those around you about the things that you're bringing to the table, the things you're working on. I think that transparency is a core value at Fund That Flip, and I see it as something that we're continuing to really kind of push into the front of each of our conversations. But being transparent about, this is where I'm at today. I know I'm not perfect. No culture is perfect. No org is perfect. No team is perfect. This is where I want to go with you. That kind of doing it together, and Mendel's talked about that, and Dave's talked about that today. That's the culture. It's the like forward momentum that they get when they all do it together. And so it starts with self-awareness, starts with awareness of those around you, and then how do you put that in, shift it into gear? Like let's go with that in mind.
I love that, Sara. And I think just as we're kind of talking about this, I'm like, because every culture is different, but like, what are those really tangible things that are really impactful? And I think a lot of times it's when we're looking for that next job after we've left one, after being just burnt out or fed up with it for a while, like what were those things that were really important? And so like thinking back to mine, it was like, I think a lot of it was transparency. It was that trust. It was, empathy and flexibility, things like that. So would be curious too from the audience, feel free to throw buzzwords like that in there. Like what has been really important to you all when you've been looking for a role. But Mendel, I'll kick it over to you to kind of talk about what folks can do to support and create a strong culture.
We actually, somebody in our office recommended that we do you called a forced happy hour session. And that was one of the first indicators to me that we needed to fix our culture, because we would sit in these happy hours and people were not enjoying it. And every once in a while it'd be good. And we realized, like, wait a minute, if we can't have a beer and have a good time together, we need to do something. And nowadays the happy hour is for sure the highlight of everybody's week. And people get to know each other in such a special way. And we'll always go out to the park, or we'll go, toss the football around or do something just kind of chill and relaxing. And we started implementing different things on top of the happy hour. So we do highs and lows of the week. So everybody goes around and says their highs and lows of the week. And then we started doing different awards that we would give out for different employee, things that we would notice. And at a certain point, I realized, oh man, we're taking half hour of our happy hour with all these awards and things that we're doing. It's not fair. So we push that back. And then we have just a straight hour of happy hour, and we make sure to get all those speeches and awards and highs and lows done so that we can really just enjoy each other's company. And to me, that's always a big barometer. I mean, Sara was talking about this earlier. Culture it's a vicious cycle either way. If you have a bad culture, it gets worse. If you have a good culture, it gets better. When you have a good culture, people want to be a part of that culture, and everyone starts pushing that culture and pushing that exciting environment. I know me, and Sara, you mentioned being honest. Me personally, I don't like technology around communication, and I leave my phone and my computer at the office, and I just take my Apple Watch home, just so that I can be totally present with my family. And what that meant for me was a remote team was going to be something that was harder for me to manage. On the other hand, it's very hard to hire a strictly in-office job these days. So what I did to make that seem reasonable and walk the walk, like Sarah was saying, is we got an office space in the hottest part in town, in the hottest office building in that spot, totally decked out the office with all the cool amenities and everything to show people that, yeah, you're right. We may not be flexible on this remote work piece, but we are going to put in every single extra penny that we have into making the actual in-office work as enjoyable and as exciting as possible, and close to where all you guys like hanging out, so that you guys can go straight from work to wherever you would have gone on a regular Wednesday night. Now you can just walk there. So that kind of walking the walk, showing people you don't have to change and be dishonest. And for me, that was remote work. I couldn't do it. I tried to do it, and maybe I never worked in a remote work company, and I didn't know how to manage it. And so that doesn't mean that you have to force yourself to do remote work, because that's what other startups are doing. But if you're not going to do remote work, you can't be lazy about it. You can't just be like, oh, well, I'm not a remote work guy, so therefore we're just going to dump everybody into some nasty office building. You have to put the same amount of effort that those who are putting into culture on the remote work side. You put that same amount of effort, if not more, into the in-office work, and whatever cost savings or whatever there is by hiring just local Cincinnati people gets pushed right back into, here are all the trips that we're doing, and here are all the exciting, weekly, bi-weekly activities that we're going to do in the office, to show that you're putting that same level of effort while being honest to yourself.
I love that, Mendel, because it definitely really speaks to, obviously remote is a big thing that is talked about a ton right now. But, each company is different, and it's how do you lean into the path that you choose to go down, and make it the best of that kind of characteristic that you can. Sara, I'm going to kick it back to you I know that Fund That Flip has a remote policy. So would love to hear a little bit more about that and how you all approach that side of things.
Yeah, some of what you said about, there's parts of all of these that there are these pros and cons, and we've been all as a society wrestling with them really for the last few years. And Fund That Flip has some teams that are in office in Cleveland, really office linked, being in the lending space. There are documents that need touching. There are people who need to be together and tap on each other's shoulders, like the environment that Mendel has created. And then there are teams that are working with more efficiently and having more of that productive engagement and great conversations, fully distributed, are kind of the words that we use. And I think what it all comes back to, and this is me putting my recruiter hat on again, is clear is kind, and the expectations up front are what are going to make or break that culture working out really well. So having the opportunity to make sure that it's presented really clearly in the job description, it's presented really clearly in my conversations with them, their very first introduction. I'm going to feel out, what's your comfort level with being in downtown Cleveland, if that's you? What's your experience working in a remote work environment, creating rapport and building relationships in a virtual environment, if that's the team you're joining? And so it all just comes back to being clear is kind, which is all in that transparency thread again. But I just wanted to make sure to touch on that briefly, because having a hybrid environment, and not where everybody's hybrid, but where some people are truly office linked and some people are virtual, it presents really unique challenges for our organization, and I think really unique opportunities to engage with what we were talking about before, a really diverse workforce bringing really unique perspectives from all over the country, all over the world. And it's a really exciting place to be, as long as those expectations are super clear up front.
I love that. Expectations are incredibly important. So thank you for touching on that point, Sara. Perfect. Okay, so we've got about 15 minutes left. We're gonna shift into our kind of third section, which is just kind of how do we communicate culture? How do we find culture, in a potential team member? How do we as potential, as job seekers find an authentic culture from the company that we're interviewing with? So let's kind of dive in there. And what I'd love to kind of start with is, how have you all figured out what culture you fit best with? And I think a lot of it is probably trial and error, but I guess what advice would you have to give to, audience members? What kind of introspection and things like that can they be doing to, help make sure that the next job that they land at is going to be one with a culture that they're going to really thrive in. Dave, would you mind kicking us off here?
Sure. Yeah, I kind of have a sort of short answer to that, but from my perspective, it certainly helps having a wide range of different workplaces. I've really experienced a lot of different things that have helped me understand what works for me and what doesn't. And I think to what Sara had said earlier, everybody is a little bit different in their needs, and every company is going to be different in their offers, right? So, but outside of that, I think there are some universal truths. I think a great culture needs to be, founded in trust and empathy and in transparency. And so those are the key items that I would always look for in a company culture. And those are the values that I seek out in candidates that are applying.
Awesome. Thanks, Dave. Sara, I'm going to send it back to you next.
Thanks, Hannah. I think it's again, the thread through the whole conversation. When you have the core values really clear, it becomes crystal clear, what you're looking for as an organization. And when those are broadcasted well, I think people can start to relate to them quicker. As far as how I found the culture that I kind of click in or that works well for me, I think there are a few different elements to that. And I think there are probably a lot of different workplaces where I could thrive. It's not like I can only thrive at Fund That Flip, and Fund That Flip's culture is so unique that this is the only place I could ever thrive. But I think there are a few things that stick out. One is even just like how you like to work. Do you like to work kind of autonomously? Do you like to have flexibility in your work? Or do you really like structure in your work? Do you like to leave work kind of thinking about it, mulling on it, have shower thoughts, and kind of come back to work, with new ideas that you've been mulling over? Or do you prefer to leave it at when you close the laptop? People have different things that they prefer about their work, and that's going to be what they look for in their culture. For me, I've wanted this blend of both of those things. Like I said, I'm like the ideation person. I'm the shower thoughts person. I'm like logging on to my Slack and I'm like, shower thought that I just had. What do you think? And that doesn't bother me that I'm thinking about work in that way. But I also want to have the flexibility to say, see you later. I'm out for the day. Done. Right. And so being able to find a place where that lands well for me, but I had to know that about myself. Like, I need a place where it's okay for me to kind of be working when I'm not working, and not working when I am on PTO. As just an example. And it took me a little bit to find a place where I could fit in that way.
I love that. Awesome. Thanks so much, Sara. Mendel, I'll let you close this out.
Awesome. Yeah, I think there's two sides to the question. How do we communicate culture, and then how do people find the right culture? I'm going to speak about the second side. When somebody is applying for a job, I think it's very, very fair, and not only fair, I would be excited if somebody asked me a question like this, to ask and say, when is the last time somebody pushed the envelope, and how did you guys respond to that? And get a really candid response out of them. And don't say, oh yeah, somebody exceeded their sales goals. Like, yeah, of course you're happy about that. Give us an example where somebody did something that maybe wasn't per policy or per, what the plan was, but it was something that was innovative and risk taking. And did you guys reward that? And give me an example. And if they can't give you a good example of that, as somebody, for me personally, I'm looking for a culture of innovation. That's not the place where I'm going to work. And if somebody is not comfortable, and if that doesn't trickle down to every level of who's doing the interview with you, everybody should know that in the company. And that should be really clear. And that kind of, I guess, goes back to your first question, which is how do you communicate culture? We had somebody in our office, we were spending a lot of money on a certain CRM software, and we're pretty far down this rabbit hole. And this person came back to me and said, Mendel, I'm making an executive decision. We've switched off of there. We're on HubSpot. Here's a demo of what I've set up in HubSpot. This is the decision. And that was that. And I was like, whoa, we just dumped $150,000 into this software, and you're just like pulling the rug out from underneath it. And at first I was kind of a little annoyed, but then I said, you know what? That's a brave person. I like that. Let me look at what they have to offer. And what they had showed me in HubSpot wasn't there yet. It wasn't there yet, but I knew that if somebody was that brave to come to me and challenge that so hardcore, that she's going to make it work, and she's not going to put an idea out there like that without it filling every single need that we have. And we just started a new class of salespeople this Monday, all on HubSpot, And it's way faster, way easier. And we're making changes on the fly. And part of that was because I gave her that freedom to really be innovative and to push something that it didn't cost me money. It ended up saving us a lot of money, but that we had gone deep into and would have been very hard for a lot of other people to walk away from. But I saw how passionate she was. And I knew that even if her idea would have failed, the fact that I allowed that passion to flourish is going to present itself in the next new greatest idea. Thank God that idea didn't fail and it was an amazing idea. But so that's an example of where we pushed. And that next Friday happy hour, I gave an announcement. I said, I want everybody to know that Drea went against what we were working on. And I'm so proud of her for doing it. And she's done an amazing job. And I have no idea where HubSpot's going to take us, but I think it's a good call. And the fact that she has taken it and taken the ownership of it, I love that. And sure enough, it worked out. And somebody who's applying for a job, if innovation is what you care about, ask that company, give me a concrete example. And if you don't get a good enough answer, ask another question. And then you can tell them, hey, this isn't where I want to work. And I know it's the tide is somewhat shifting between how many jobs are available. And, if it's a employer or employee market, anybody that's purpose-driven is going to be more than happy to answer a question like that. Anybody that's purpose-driven is going to be more than happy and impressed by you asking a question like that. And you'll never lose by asking a question like that to somebody that you're trying to get a job from.
Yeah, I really love that, Mendel. Just kind of, what are the cultural elements that are really important to you? And then asking for those concrete examples. I think something else too is like, I always really love the opportunity, rather than the people maybe doing the interviewing and the hiring, like, can I talk with, someone that I'd be working with as a peer? And like, I think those can sometimes just feel like, less pressure conversations where you can have a more transparent chat there to get a good feel for that culture. I also too just wanted to kind of share a couple of thoughts too on like kind of figuring out what culture you will thrive in, just, kind of going back to figure out what those traits are. I think knowing yourself through the experience that you have, I think that those are all really important. I think it's also really important, like it's the culture of the organization. I think oftentimes like who your manager is also really important, and understanding the culture that you're going to have with your manager, and kind of what that working relationship is going to look like. Are you someone who's really deadline oriented, and are they going to provide that for you? Or are they going to, just go out and do your job and not necessarily have as much structure there that you might be looking for. But I think too, also, like, I think something else that is a good learning experience is that maybe they don't meet, work necessarily in the best way that you have found yourself to work in the past, but that doesn't mean you can't grow into a new style of working as well. So I think it's always really, really important to kind of be an open mind to that. And, how can I solve this problem, being that, I'm missing this element at this company or with this manager. How can I provide that, for myself? So just a couple of thoughts there. Sara and Dave, I want to let you kind of continue on Mendel's kind of train of thought, and like, what are the things that you can do to make sure that you're truly understanding the authentic culture of a company that you're interviewing with? And then also we had a question about, how as an employer can you, be making sure to ask the right questions, and truly understanding if that applicant is going to fit your culture. Like, what are some of those tactics? So Sara, I'm going to kind of kick that two-sided question to you.
Yeah. I want to start with the last part, which is like fully in my wheelhouse, right? Like, how do you feel out if somebody's like going to have, sometimes we talk about like a mindset fit, or going to really work well within the existing culture. And something that I found myself asking a lot in the initial conversation with candidates is, hey, what are you prioritizing in your job search? I love to find out whether it's like just the technical tools that we're going to use. Hey, that's great. Like, there is nothing wrong with like being really excited to build your technical skill. But I really love when I start to hear people say like, I want to work as part of a collaborative team. I want to be part of something. I want to be part of a startup where I can have an outsized impact. They start to say things that really like hit on the elements of our core values. I want to show up, and I want to work hard with my team. I want to build success at an organization. I want to learn. Those are the things that start immediately just really kind of snowballing into a great, and I hesitate to say fit, I like to think about like add, right? They're going to bring a new perspective with that work ethic and mindset that's going to do really great things. Because you can't always just bring in somebody who's consistently going to be like going against the grain the whole time. They won't have a great experience, and the people they're working with will be frustrated by them. I think it's a balance of, that challenging the status quo while still having this commonplace that we meet, which is we're all here to learn. We're all here to build success. We're here to do it as a team. We're here to work hard together. So those are the things that I'm really out there looking for as an employer. And back to what you said, Hannah, from like a job seeker's perspective, I think that you can really come into that conversation connecting dots between where you've been, what's in your mind today, and where you're going and how it plugs into this role. So I would always encourage job seekers to bring that mentality, that just whatever you've done before, and especially if it's like a little mismatch to the role that you're applying for today, come in ready to connect those dots. That's a mindset thing that I'm also looking for, right? Not somebody who's like, well, what I've got like up till now like should be good enough for you, right? Like let's go together to like what's next for you, what you're looking for next. I don't think I answered the first half of your question, but I also know we're getting short on time, so we can circle back there.
No worries. Thanks, Sarah. And I love the advice that you are giving to recruiters there and like looking for what people are going to add, because I think that also helps us to continue to diversify our thought and push the status quo while still being a strong culture fit. Dave, I'll let you close out with your thoughts on all of that.
Thank you. I think Sarah knocked it out of the park with the answer to the second question. So I'll take the first question. That if you're a candidate and you're going through the interview process with the company and you're trying to suss out their culture and seeing if that's a fit for you, ask your interviews to describe their company culture in their words. I think it's very telling when people are proud of their response, or they might seem a little bit reticent to say the wrong thing, right? I would also encourage you to ask, what does recognition look like at the company? Some companies give out awards, shout outs, do bonuses or promotions, but I think it's also very telling how a company rewards their star players, so to speak. And then lastly, if you're feeling out the interviewers and you're feeling comfortable enough, I would argue that retention is a major correlating factor to a good culture. And so if you're confident enough to ask the question, you could bluntly ask the company if they've had issues with turnover in the past, and maybe to expand on that. Maybe in a more subtle way, you just ask your interviewers how long they've been with the company and what their experience is like during their tenure.
I love that, Dave. I think retention is such a key point that is tied to culture. So thank you so much for sharing. Awesome. Well, we are pretty much wrapped up. So I'm just going to close us out with a few final things. Mendel, Dave, Sarah, thank you both. Thank you all so much for your time today. We really appreciate the insight. We hope everyone has really enjoyed the conversation. We're going to share in the chat and in the follow-up email that we send tomorrow, LinkedIn's for each of their companies to be able to follow and stay in touch with what they're doing. Feel free to connect with Dave, Mendel, and Sarah as well. You can also stay in touch if you're not already a Purpose Jobs community member. You can stay in touch with us by subscribing to our newsletter. So we'll also make sure that everyone has that link as well. And then if you are Columbus based, join us for a happy hour next Tuesday in downtown Columbus. We'd love to have you join us and see you there. But otherwise, without further ado, thank you everyone so much for your time. We really appreciate it. And have a great rest of your weekend.
Thank you guys.